The sound of crystal glasses clinking in celebration of the new public relations director had barely faded when a harsh wheezing noise escaped my throat, sharp and uneven, like a damaged kettle. My name is Sailor Cole. I am an antique book restoration expert, far more familiar with dust, silence, and fragile paper than with extravagant parties like this one. I did not belong in a room filled with tailored suits and carefully rehearsed smiles. My sister Sloane stood at the small podium at the front of the VIP room, her perfectly white teeth glowing under the warm amber lights. She leaned toward the microphone with that polished PR smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Here we go again," she said, her tone heavy with exaggerated fatigue. "Sailor, don't make a scene. It's just mushroom soup. There's no crab. Or do you want to ruin my promotion party?" A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the room. Sloane believed she had landed the joke perfectly, as she often did, performing for the audience and feeding off their approval. She did not notice that the man seated directly across from me was no longer paying attention to her. Magnus Thorne, the group chairman, and the very person who had signed off on her promotion, was staring at my soup bowl in absolute horror. Magnus Thorne's daughter also lives with a severe shellfish allergy. He knows exactly what anaphylaxis looks like. He knows the signs of an airway beginning to close. Before I could even process what was happening, he was already moving. He reached into the inside pocket of his immaculate $5,000 suit, pulled out an EpiPen, and rushed toward me with a speed that seemed impossible for a 58-year-old man. But to understand how I ended up in a life-threatening situation, I need to go back to earlier that evening. The dinner was supposed to be an intimate celebration of Sloane's promotion, held in the VIP room of Étoile, a 3 Michelin-star restaurant where reservations required a 3-month wait and a limitless credit card. The room glowed with soft golden light, the kind that made everything look like it belonged in a luxury magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Dark wood paneling lined the walls. The atmosphere was thick with old money and fresh ambition. I was 26 years old. Despite my age, I had already built a reputation as an antique book conservator. In academic circles, some people called me the surgeon for history, a nickname earned through my calm detachment, strict logic, and deep understanding of preservation chemistry. I work with materials that are hundreds of years old, handling them with the precision most people reserve for diffusing explosives. My hands have saved manuscripts that survived wars, floods, and fires. My work demands patience, quiet, and deep respect for fragile beauty. Sloane, by contrast, is 29 and had just been promoted to public relations director at Thorne Global, one of the largest multinational corporations in the country. She embodies glamour, designer clothes, flawless hair, and a smile she can switch on and off instantly. Where I am cautious and reserved, she is loud and impulsive. Where I preserve, she destroys. Our parents, Alastair and Cordelia Cole, both 60 and deeply image conscious, sat proudly at the table that night. They glowed with reflected success, eager to talk about Sloane's career, her influence, and her visibility. My work, on the other hand, was always minimized, dismissed as gloomy and insignificant because they never understood its value. To them, I was the disappointing daughter who chose books over boardrooms. The tension that eventually led to my poisoning, yes, poisoning, is something that began before the dinner even started. Earlier that evening, Sloane had been in the restaurant lobby when Magnus Thorne arrived. She attempted to intercept him, hoping to show off a media report she had prepared about Thorne Global's latest acquisition. She wanted his attention. She wanted his praise. Instead, Magnus noticed me standing near the coat check. His face immediately brightened with genuine interest. He walked straight past Sloane and spent nearly 20 minutes talking with me about the deacidification of ancient paper. He asked detailed questions about pH balance, alkalization treatments, and the differences between European and Asian paper fibers. He was deeply engaged. He even mentioned a collection of 18th century letters his company had recently acquired and asked whether I would consider consulting on their preservation. Throughout that conversation, I watched Sloane's expression change. I saw her jaw tighten. I saw her hands curl into fists. I saw anger building behind her eyes. This was meant to be her night, her moment. And yet there I was, the younger sister with the boring career, holding the attention of the most powerful person in the room. Sloane's jealousy was intense, and it was dangerous. She wanted to humiliate me. She wanted to prove that I was weak, or worse, that I was lying about my allergy to gain sympathy and attention. She convinced herself that a small amount of crab wouldn't truly hurt anyone. At most, she thought, it might cause a mild reaction, some itching or hives. Her goal was simple: make me lose credibility in front of Magnus, our parents, and everyone who mattered. So she set her trap. I did not see it happen, but I later reconstructed the events through witness accounts. About 30 minutes before the soup course, Sloane excused herself from the table and went to the kitchen. There, she found Chef Bastien, known for his inventive twists on classic French cuisine. "Chef Bastien," she said, flashing her practiced PR smile, "I have a special request." She mentioned his famous crab fat oil, a signature ingredient admired by critics. The oil was made by slowly rendering blue crab roe and fat with aromatics until it became a rich amber liquid, intensely flavorful and prized in high-end kitchens. "I was wondering," Sloane continued, "if, just for today, this important night for me, you could add a touch of that crab oil to the truffle mushroom soup. I think it would be extraordinary. Something novel. Unexpected." Chef Bastien hesitated. Crab and truffle were not a traditional pairing, but he was a creative chef and open to thoughtful experimentation. After a moment's consideration, he agreed. "For you, Miss Cole," he said politely, "I will prepare one bowl with the crab oil as an amuse-bouche before the main soup." What he could not have known, what he had no way of knowing, was that this request carried deadly intent. When the soup arrived, it looked exquisite. The waiter, a young man named Andy, placed the bowls carefully in front of us. Mine was topped with delicate reddish-brown oil swirls that shimmered in the candlelight like molten copper. Sloane leaned toward me, her voice gentle and reassuring. "I asked the chef to add a little smoked chili oil and pine mushroom extract to yours," she said. "I know rich food can overwhelm you. This should make it easier to eat." I should have questioned it. Caution is part of who I am. My profession teaches me to test everything, to trust nothing without verification. But that night, the atmosphere, the lighting, and my sister's apparent kindness dulled my instincts. The soup smelled overwhelmingly of truffle and mushroom. The crab oil was visually indistinguishable from truffle oil, and the mushroom aroma completely masked any trace of seafood. I suspected nothing. I took one small spoonful. The flavor was remarkable, deep, savory, and complex. For a brief moment, I thought Sloane had genuinely done something thoughtful. Then my throat began to close. The reaction was immediate and severe. My airway constricted violently, as if an invisible hand were crushing my windpipe. My lips tingled, burned, and started to swell. My tongue thickened, blocking my breath. Angry red hives spread rapidly across my skin. I tried to stand, but my legs failed. The room tilted, and I collapsed from my chair onto the plush carpet, gasping for air I could not draw in. I could not speak. I could not breathe. All I could do was claw at my throat and produce a broken wheeze that barely sounded human. And through it all, I heard my sister laughing. Not nervously, not in panic, but triumphantly. The consequences of having a daughter arrested for attempted murder at a Michelin-starred restaurant would have been catastrophic. The scandal would have been enormous and impossible to contain. But I noticed something else unfolding in real time. I saw Magnus's hand tighten around his phone. I noticed nearby guests hovering, their phones already out, likely messaging friends about what they were witnessing. The restaurant manager stood wringing his hands, visibly panicked about the public relations disaster forming in front of him. And I saw my opening. Despite lying on a stretcher, my throat still swollen and my voice reduced to a rough rasp, I lifted my hand and pulled the oxygen mask down. "Ma'am, please keep that on," the paramedic insisted, reaching to adjust it. "You need the oxygen." I pushed her hand away, weakly, but with intention. "Wait," I managed to croak. The words scraped my throat like broken glass. Magnus turned toward me, surprised. The room went silent as everyone strained to hear. I looked directly at him, my eyes steady despite what my body had endured. "Don't call the police." "Yet," I said, forcing each word out. The paramedic glanced anxiously at my monitors. "Arresting the PR director will cause Thorn Global's stock to drop," I continued. I don't want to affect your assets. I paused to breathe. My lawyer will handle this. Tomorrow. The relief on my family's faces was immediate and almost absurd. My mother let out a sob. Oh, Sailor, thank you. You're such a good girl, such a good sister. My father's shoulders sagged. We'll work this out as a family. We'll talk calmly tomorrow. Sloane, meanwhile, looked at me with a mix of relief and quiet contempt. I recognized the expression instantly. She thought I was afraid. She believed I would back down. That family loyalty would save her. She stepped closer to the ambulance, her voice softening into that practiced, persuasive tone. Sailor, I know you're upset. You have every right to be. But we're sisters, we're family. We can work through this. Maybe therapy, counseling. I raised my hand to stop her. When I spoke again, my voice was barely above a whisper, but every word landed clearly. My lawyer will contact you with the terms. Terms? Sloane blinked. For the settlement, I clarified. You're going to pay for everything. Her expression hardened. You're going to sue me? Your own sister? Would you prefer prison? I asked calmly. 8 years in a state facility, or a civil settlement? Your choice. Magnus watched with open approval. Your lawyer should call my office as well, he said. Chef Bastian and the server will provide full statements. Thorn Global will cooperate fully. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me, Magnus replied. You protected the evidence. That was smart. Most people wouldn't think that clearly under pressure. I work with fragile things, I said as the paramedic replaced my oxygen mask. I know how to protect them. We need to go, the paramedic said firmly, signaling the driver. As the ambulance doors closed, I looked at my family one last time. They thought I had shown mercy. They believed I chose family over accountability. They were wrong. I needed time. Time to build an airtight case. Time for them to lower their guard. Time to gather proof that would make denial impossible. Sloane assumed this would lead to mild negotiations, maybe a small payout and a forced apology. She had no idea what was coming. I spent 3 days in the hospital. The damage was worse than expected. My vocal cords were inflamed. My heart required monitoring from repeated epinephrine doses. I suffered nightmares, panic attacks, and an intense fear around food. But I did not rest. On the second day, I had my lawyer, Mr. Lewis, visit me. He was sharp, aggressive, and efficient, the kind of attorney who thrived on clean, devastating cases. Tell me everything, he said. So I did. Every detail. Magnus's earlier conversation with me, Sloane's disappearance to the kitchen, the soup, the public confession. This is airtight, Mr. Lewis said. We have witnesses. We have physical evidence. We have the chairman of a multinational corporation. I want sworn affidavits from the chef and the server, I said, before anyone pressures them. Within 48 hours, he replied. And full medical documentation. Everything. Already ordered. I looked at him steadily. I want her destroyed, legally, completely. Mr. Lewis smiled not kindly. How much? $900,000. He nodded slowly. And mediation? Yes, 3 weeks. For a case like this, he said, they'll agree immediately. Good, I replied, because my silence isn't forgiveness, it's strategy. Over the next 2 weeks, he worked relentlessly. Affidavits, medical records, expert opinions, a case file that left no room for doubt. My family thought I was healing, processing, considering forgiveness. I spoke to none of them. On day 19, Mr. Lewis called. Mediation is set for day 21. Perfect, I said. Let's finish this. It took 3 weeks for the swelling in my throat to subside enough for me to speak without pain, and for my heart to stabilize so I could sit upright for more than an hour without it racing uncontrollably. That same stretch of time allowed Mr. Lewis to assemble every piece of evidence into a legal file so solid that even the most expensive defense attorney would advise settlement. It was also how long my family waited before attempting to sweep attempted murder under the rug as if it were nothing more than a spilled drink on expensive carpet. The mediation room smelled faintly of lemon polish and desperation. It was a deliberately neutral corporate space. Beige walls, a long oak table, leather chairs that creaked when you shifted. The kind of room where careers ended quietly, with signatures instead of shouting. I arrived early with Mr. Lewis, my hands still trembling slightly from medication I would be on for months. The doctors said the tremors would fade. I wasn't sure I wanted them to. They reminded me of what I had survived. Sloane arrived 12 minutes late. Of course she did. She wore a dove-gray dress that likely cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair pulled into a soft chignon that projected innocence. Her makeup was flawless, carefully balanced to suggest vulnerability without guilt. But it was her expression that turned my stomach. That rehearsed look of remorse. I had seen it my entire life. The face she wore when she wanted something, when she was preparing to lie convincingly. Our parents flanked her. My father's jaw was rigid, already decided on the outcome. My mother glanced at me repeatedly, her eyes filled with something new, fear mixed with pleading. "Sailor," my mother began softly, using the tone she once reserved for childhood scrapes. "We're so glad you're feeling better." I didn't respond. Mr. Lewis had been clear. Speak only when necessary. Let the evidence speak. Don't engage emotionally. Sloane leaned forward, right on cue. Her eyes glistened. "Sailor, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice cracking perfectly. "I thought you'd just get a rash. Maybe an itchy throat. I was teasing you. I didn't know it would be this serious." She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. "I didn't know," she repeated, tears forming. "If I had, I never would have." "Stop," I said sharply. Everyone flinched. My mother rushed in. "Please. She made a mistake, a terrible one, but she didn't mean for it to go this far. Can't you just let it go?" Let it go. As if she hadn't watched me collapse, as if intent erased outcome. My father cleared his throat. "Sailor, we're your family. Family forgives. Family moves on." Something inside me finally broke free, not painfully but cleanly. Obligation, guilt, hope. All of it fell away. "No," I said. Sloane's expression flickered. "No," I repeated. "I don't want a family like this." The silence was complete. Mr. Lewis opened his briefcase. The sound of the latch snapping shut echoed like a gavel. "Miss Cole," he said to Sloane, his tone clinical, "you are a public relations director. You understand optics. You know the difference between a prank and criminal harm." He slid a document across the table. "We have testimony from Chef Bastien confirming you requested crab fat oil. We have testimony from the server confirming you directed the bowl to your sister. We have toxicology reports confirming shellfish proteins consistent with deliberate contamination." Another document. Then another. "We also have your messages to the chef, your internet searches, and witness statements. This was premeditated." My parents went pale. "The district attorney is prepared to pursue aggravated assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm," Mr. Lewis continued. "You are facing up to 8 years in state prison." Sloane shook her head frantically. "No, I didn't mean." "Alternatively," Mr. Lewis said, "my client is willing to settle civilly." My father found his voice. "How much, Mr. Papp?" Lewis looked at me. I nodded once. $900,000. Sloane's composure collapsed. "That's impossible. You own property, assets. Your parents have equity," Mr. Lewis replied calmly. "The alternative is prison." 45 minutes later, they signed. I watched Sloane's hand shake as she signed away her future. I watched my parents sign as guarantors, trading retirement security for their golden child's freedom. When it was done, Sloane looked at me. "I'm your sister." "No," I said, standing. "You're someone who tried to kill me." I walked out into sunlight that felt like absolution. Months passed. Sloane lost her job, then her apartment, then her reputation. Payments cleared, one by one. A year later, I stood in my own library, a restored warehouse filled with light and the scent of old paper. My company, Coal Conservation and Restoration, was thriving. The settlement money had built it. Magnus Thorne's trust had expanded it. My work gave it purpose. My phone buzzed. A final message from Mr. Lewis. Final payment cleared. Case closed. I returned to my workbench, pulled on my gloves, and opened a centuries-old manuscript. I preserved what was worth saving. And I removed what was toxic, carefully, completely, and without regret. The months that followed confirmed what had already become clear. Sloane's professional life unraveled quickly. Her dismissal was framed as restructuring, but no one believed it. In public relations circles, reputations don't collapse quietly. They disintegrate through whispers, cautions, and closed doors. Her name became shorthand for risk. Assets were sold, payments were made. Each installment represented another piece of the life she had built slipping away. I moved in the opposite direction. 1 year after the night I nearly died, I stood inside my own library, a converted warehouse filled with light, brick walls, and long rows of custom shelving. The air carried the scent of aged paper and lemon oil, the familiar perfume of preserved history. This was Coal Conservation and Restoration, a company built carefully, deliberately, and entirely on my own terms. The settlement had been the foundation. What followed was credibility, opportunity, and trust. Magnus Thorne's endorsement opened doors I never expected to walk through. His family archive alone secured my firm's future, and from there, other clients followed. Now, the space was alive with quiet purpose. My junior conservators worked in the back room, their movements precise, their focus absolute. This was the environment I understood, controlled, respectful, honest. Every book on those shelves told a story of damage and repair, water stains, acid burn, mold, neglect. Some could be restored, others required difficult decisions. Preservation, I had learned, wasn't about saving everything. It was about knowing what could be healed and what had to be removed. My phone buzzed once more. A final confirmation from Mr. Lewis. Final payment received. Case closed. I felt no triumph, no bitterness, just calm. Somewhere else, Sloane was living a smaller life, constrained by consequences she had earned. My parents, I knew, blamed me for enforcing boundaries they had ignored for decades. Their opinions no longer held power. I turned back to my work table, slipped on my gloves, and opened a fragile manuscript. The pages were worn but intact, worth saving. This was my life now. I preserved what mattered, I eliminated what was harmful, and for the first time, I was exactly where I belonged. 2 years later, I ran into my mother at a charity auction. The venue was a restored opera house. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, donors whispering numbers that could change lives. I was there on behalf of the archive consortium I now chaired. She was there because old habits die hard. She saw me first. I recognized the hesitation immediately, the brief pause before deciding whether to approach. In the past, she would have crossed the room without thinking, already prepared to minimize, excuse, and redirect. This time, she waited. That alone told me everything. "Sailor," she said finally, stopping a careful distance away. Her voice was polite, cautious. "You look well." "I am," I replied. She nodded, eyes flicking to the name on my placard. "Chair Grading Committee." She swallowed. "I heard your firm restored the Larkspur collection," she said. "They said it was impossible." "They say that a lot," I answered. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. "How is your sister?" I met her eyes. "I don't know." That was the truth. And for once, the truth didn't feel sharp. My mother looked older than I remembered, smaller. Consequences had a way of aging people who had never expected to face them. "I wish things had been different," she said. "So do I replied, "but wishing doesn't change what happened." She nodded again. No argument. No pressure. Just acceptance. We parted without hugs, without promises, without rehearsed forgiveness. Later that evening, as bids climbed and glasses clinked, I reflected on how strange peace could feel. It wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It was quiet. Steady. Earned. At home that night, I unlocked my library and walked through the rows of preserved history. Every volume had survived something. Fire, flood, neglect, betrayal. So had I. I turned off the lights, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. Some stories don't need redemption arcs. They need endings. And this one finally had one. Years later, people would sometimes ask how I knew when to stop fighting. They assumed there had been a moment of victory, some dramatic instant where justice felt complete. There wasn't. Justice, I learned, isn't fireworks. It's maintenance. It's choosing, again and again, not to reopen wounds that have already closed cleanly. Coal conservation and restoration expanded slowly and deliberately. I refused rapid growth. I refused investors who wanted control. Fragile things don't survive impatience. I trained my staff to understand that restoration is not about erasing damage. It's about stabilizing truth. Occasionally, someone new would ask about my family. I kept the answer simple. We're not in contact. No explanation. No apology. The truth didn't require decoration. One evening, while cataloging a private collection, I came across a handwritten note tucked inside a 19th century book. It was brief, almost careless. Some things break because they were never meant to bear that weight. I stood there for a long time, holding that page. For years, I had believed strength meant endurance, absorbing harm without complaint, staying quiet for the sake of harmony. I had confused tolerance with virtue. Now I knew better. Strength was knowing when to remove your hands before the structure collapsed. Strength was documentation, boundaries, follow through. Strength was walking away without looking back. I slid the note into an archival sleeve, labeled it carefully, and placed it where it belonged, preserved. Context intact. Damage acknowledged. Some lessons don't fade. They don't need to. They simply become part of the record. There are no headlines about what happened to me, no documentaries, no podcasts dissecting every detail. The story ended where it should have, inside a courtroom conference room sealed by signatures and consequences. That, too, was intentional. I learned that healing doesn't require witnesses. Closure doesn't need applause. Some victories are private by design. Occasionally, a former acquaintance reaches out, a vague message, a careful compliment about my work. Sometimes they ask how I did it, how I rebuilt so completely. I never give them the answer they expect. I don't say resilience. I don't say forgiveness. I don't say karma. I say preparation. I prepared by listening when people revealed who they were. I prepared by documenting instead of confronting. I prepared by choosing timing over impulse. And when the moment came, I acted without hesitation. That is what changed everything. The final lesson wasn't about my sister or my parents or even survival. It was this: you don't owe loyalty to people who would sacrifice your life for their comfort. You don't owe silence to those who benefit from it. And you don't owe access to anyone who has proven they are unsafe. My story sits quietly now, filed away like the manuscripts I restore, not erased, not dramatized, simply preserved as truth. And that is enough. I don't tell this story often, not because it hurts, those edges have long since dulled, but because it no longer defines me. Trauma can be a chapter without being the title. Every so often, when I'm training a new conservator, they'll hesitate before removing something damaged from a text, a page fused by mold, ink too corrupted to stabilize. Are you sure we can't save it? They'll ask. I always give the same answer. Saving everything isn't preservation, I tell them. It's denial. They nod. They understand. Or they will someday. At night, when the building is quiet and the city hums softly beyond the windows, I walk the aisles of my library and think about how much space I've made for myself. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, legally. Nothing is chasing me anymore. No explanations pending, no apologies owed, no debts outstanding. Just work that matters, boundaries that hold, and a life that is finally unmistakably mine. Some people call that revenge. Some call it justice. I call it resolution. End.